Imagine a world where sentient beings have autonomy. No one has to be looked as property. We'll live in a vegan world. Vegan world. Vegan world. Vegan world. Come and stay, come and play. No need to go away. No one will be needlessly slayed in the vegan world. Imagine a world where we are equals. No one has to be damsels, 'cause we will live in a vegan world. Vegan world. Vegan world. Vegan world. Come and stay, come and play. No need to go away. No one will be needlessly slayed in the vegan world. The only world worth living is a where fish are allowed to do their own swimming, and no one has to be fibbing that they love animals when they are really putting them through the worst kind of life, because they will be in a vegan world. Vegan world. Vegan world. Come and stay, come and play. No need to go away. No one will be needlessly slayed in the vegan world.
Hi everyone. Let me turn on the camera. Hi. Hi. So we are obviously gonna be watching like Frankenstein stuff. But I'm glad you guys liked it. Yeah, I was gonna try it in a dubstep version because I was like, like the lyrics could work. I just think that it was like maybe not fit for like AI deathcore, and so I tried it with AI dubstep and it worked pretty good. So I was like, hey, I could use that. Um. Anyway, um. Davey wanted to be here and watch this. I don't know. I don't know where he's at. He's such a slacker. Slacker. Um. Anyway, we're still gonna watch it. We're gonna see what it's about. I have literally no idea what this is about. So we're gonna watch this, and then we're gonna go at like the actual book. Um. Yeah. The book we are not going to be doing, like, I'm not gonna do any of the letters parts. We're just gonna get straight into the story. Like all the back, like basically the letters in the book are just like context building. They don't really, to me, I feel like they kind of just make the story confusing because like they're in different perspectives rather than Victor Frankenstein's, and I just like to dive into Victor Frankenstein's side of the story. So part of the story. So we're just gonna start with chapter 1. Like we're gonna ignore all the letters. Um But we're gonna watch this first.
We were 25 and brimming with life, ready to take on the world. I had just been promoted to a high-paying and stable job, store manager of a Blockbuster Video. She had just finished nursing school. She was young and athletic, a runner who didn't know the meaning of the word quit. We purchased a home
and
and
in like grayscale, or if I'm just like, if this is actually in grayscale, or if it just is like me making it in grayscale.
suburbia, and were fearlessly plowing past life's roadside markers, no brakes, top down, joyously in love. And we were on our way to the hospital to have a baby. We arrived at the hospital prepared in our minds to become parents. We had gone through Lamaze classes and baby-proofed our home. We bought baby clothes and a crib. We stockpiled chewable books and super absorbent diapers. We picked out the perfect name. But as my wife was being wheeled toward the operating room, the doctor asked a question that made our efforts seem laughably insignificant. "So," he asked, "are you ready to bring a life into the world?" Looking back
So far, I'm very confused. Is anyone else confused? I mean, I'm gonna keep watching, but so far I'm very confused.
at our tax returns from that time, I'm horrified. How could we have been so irresponsible? I was frighteningly immature, precariously employed, and didn't have the first clue to the sacrifices necessary to give a new baby the attention it deserves. The responsibility owed to any new life brought unknowingly and unconsentingly into the world, with few guarantees beyond the experience of pain, heartache, and death. And yes, taxes. The next few years were hard, harder than I ever imagined it could be, but worth it all the more. Our children's love has given me a depth of contentment and happiness beyond description, but the sleepless nights and 1,000 readings of Green Eggs and Ham were not an investment on some future return, not a down payment or a transaction of any kind. They were what our creation deserved from their creator. Unfortunately, not all parents feel the same. In Mary Shelley's masterpiece of Gothic horror, there has been some confusion as to whose name the eponymous title belongs. As I'm sure you know, Frankenstein is the mad scientist's name. The creation, Frankenstein's quote-unquote monster, isn't given one. But what interests me is the
Technically, Damon, his name, like the Damon.
public confusion that
or
gets
Damon.
mentioned far less frequently. Who is the villain of this story? While Shelley far from excuses the creature for his violent actions, Frankenstein, the negligent father, is her antagonist. Like Dracula or Lord of the Rings, it's the villain's moniker that infamously graces the cover of the novel. And beyond this, Shelley makes great pains throughout the book to make sure Frankenstein's selfish nature is front and center. Frankenstein is not ignorant.
Not in the 1831 book. In the 1818 book, it is much more prevalent that Frankenstein is the antagonist. The 1831 book, she kind of framed it like he was somewhat of a victim. That's at least how I interpreted the 1831 book. I don't know about Allison, if you got that when we were reading it, but to me, in the 1831 version, it kind of seemed like he was portrayed as like a somewhat odd victim. And it was weird because like he clearly wasn't.
Of his responsibility. He knows what is owed his creature. In a fit of enthusiastic madness, I created a rational creature and was bound towards him to assure as far as was in my power his happiness and well-being. But does he provide for his creation as far as was in his power? Far from it. The reversal of his enthusiasm is so abrupt as to be comical. I had desired it with an ardor that far exceeded moderation, but now that I had finished, the beauty of the dream vanished, and breathless horror and disgust filled my heart. Frankenstein's behavior when the monster awakes plays out like a fever dream. Overcome by exhaustion and disgust for what he's done, he abruptly decides to take a nap. When he awakes, the monster is there, looming over his bedside, staring like some gruesome child that's come for a nighttime glass of milk. Frankenstein, in a panic, flees his home, not returning until obligation forces him to. Finding the monster gone upon his arrival, he initially feels relief, but guilt begins to assail his conscience. With such extreme effects, he behaves like a lunatic, cutting himself off from his family and friends, wallowing in self-recrimination. He reminded me of Raskolnikov, the miserable wretch from Crime and Punishment, who drove himself to madness with the guilt of murder. I felt as if I had committed some great crime, the consciousness of which haunted me. I was guiltless, but I had indeed drawn down a horrible curse upon my head, as mortal as that of crime. Frankenstein's guilt in an ironic twist comes from the life he has created, and his failure as a father. Where happiness and well-being were owed, he gave nothing. I think the monster himself puts it best in his self-pitying account of this condition. I, the miserable and the abandoned, am an abortion, to be spurned at, and kicked, and tramped upon. Even now my blood boils at the recollection of this injustice.
Well, this is gonna... I feel like I'm not gonna watch this, because this is gonna spoil a lot. This is like telling the story. Maybe we should watch this after. I think we're gonna watch this after. Because this is gonna spoil a lot. Because this is like telling the story in like a condensed form. Okay, we're gonna watch this after. Anyway, we're gonna just have that as be. We're just gonna have that be the background. Because like there's nothing to see, so we're just gonna watch, like, look at this as the background while we're listening, and we can just hang out.
Section 6 of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Volume 1, Chapter 1. I am by birth a Genevese, and my family is one of the most distinguished of that republic. My ancestors had been for many years councillors and syndics, and my father had filled several public situations with honour and reputation. He was respected by all who knew him for his integrity and indefatigable attention to public business. He passed his younger days perpetually occupied by the affairs of his country, and it was not until the decline of life that he thought of marrying, and bestowing on the state sons who might carry his virtues and his name down to posterity. As the circumstances of his marriage illustrate his character, I cannot refrain from relating them. One of his most intimate friends was a merchant, who, from a flourishing state, fell, through numerous mischances, into poverty. This man, whose name was Beaufort, was of a proud and unbending disposition, and could not...
Hey! Allison! I pronounced his name right! Beaufort! Let's go! I was so nervous about that. Do you remember? I was so nervous about pronouncing his name right. Let's go! Anyway, sorry. We could go back.
to live in poverty and oblivion in the same country where he had formerly been distinguished for his rank and magnificence. Having paid his debts, therefore, in the most honourable manner, he retreated with his daughter to the town of Lucerne, where he lived unknown and in wretchedness. My father loved Beaufort with the truest friendship, and was deeply grieved by his retreat in these unfortunate circumstances. He grieved also for the loss of his society, and resolved to seek him out and endeavour to persuade him to begin the world again through his credit and assistance. Beaufort had taken effectual measures to conceal himself, and it was 10 months before my father discovered his abode. Overjoyed at this discovery, he hastened to the house, which was situated in a mean street, near the Reuss. But when he entered, misery and despair alone welcomed him. Beaufort had saved but a very small sum of money from the wreck of his fortunes, sufficient to provide him with sustenance for some months, and in the meantime he hoped to procure some respectable employment in a merchant's house. The interval was consequently spent in inaction. His grief only became more deep and rankling when he had leisure for reflection, and at length it took so fast hold of his mind that at the end of 3 months he lay on a bed of sickness, incapable of any exertion. His daughter.
Okay, leave a 1 in the chat if I should, like, get really good at narrating this book, and then make a own, like do an audiobook for this channel about Frankenstein. I'll get really good at the voices and everything.
Attended him with the greatest tenderness, but she saw with despair that their little fund.
And then maybe, Allison, maybe you could play the female characters. Ooh.
Was rapidly decreasing, and that there
Okay,
was
I'm
no
gonna
other
go back a
prospect
little
of
bit.
support.
So
But
we gotta
Caroline
start with
Beaufort
this.
possessed a mind of an uncommon mould, where he lived unknown and in wretchedness. My father loved Beaufort with the truest friendship, and was deeply grieved by his retreat in these unfortunate circumstances. He grieved also for the loss of his society, and resolved to seek him out and endeavour to persuade him to begin the world again through his credit and assistance. Beaufort had taken effectual measures to conceal himself, and it was 10 months before my father discovered his abode. Overjoyed at this discovery, he hastened to the house, which was situated in a mean street, near the Reuss. But when he entered, misery and despair alone welcomed him. Beaufort had saved but a very small sum of money from the wreck of his fortunes, sufficient to provide him with sustenance for some months, and in the meantime he hoped to procure some respectable employment in a merchant's house. The interval was consequently spent in inaction. His grief only became more deep and rankling when he had leisure for reflection, and at length it took so fast hold of his mind that at the end of 3 months he lay on a bed of sickness, incapable of any exertion. His daughter attended him with the greatest tenderness, but she saw with despair that their little fund was rapidly decreasing, and that there was no other prospect of support. But Caroline Beaufort possessed a mind of an uncommon mould, and her courage rose to support her in her adversity. She procured plain work, she plaited straw, and by various means contrived to earn a pittance scarcely sufficient to support life. Several months passed in this manner. Her father grew worse, her time was more entirely occupied in attending him, her means of subsistence decreased, and in the 10th month her father died in her arms, leaving her an orphan and a beggar. This last blow overcame her, and she knelt by Beaufort's coffin weeping bitterly when my father entered the chamber. He came like a protecting spirit to the poor girl, who committed herself to his care, and after the interment of his friend he conducted her to Geneva and placed her under the protection of a relation. 2 years after this event, Caroline became his wife. When my father became a husband and a parent, he found his time so occupied by the duties of his new situation that he relinquished many of his public employments and devoted himself to the education of his children. Of these I was the eldest, and the destined successor to all his labours and utility. No creature could have more tender parents than mine. My improvement and health were their constant care, especially as I remained for several years their only child. But before I continue my narrative, I must record an incident which took place when I was 4 years of age. My father had a sister, whom he tenderly loved, and who had married early in life an Italian gentleman. Soon after her marriage, she had accompanied her husband into his native country, and for some years my father had very little communication with her. About the time I mentioned, she died, and a few months afterwards he received a letter from her husband, acquainting him with his intention of marrying an Italian lady, and requesting my father to take charge of the infant Elizabeth, the only child of his deceased sister. "It is my wish," he said, "that you should consider her as your own daughter, and educate her thus. Her mother's fortune is secured to her, the documents of which I will commit to your keeping. Reflect upon this proposition, and decide whether you would prefer educating your niece yourself to her being brought up by a stepmother." My father did not hesitate, and immediately went to Italy, that he might accompany the little Elizabeth to her future home. I have
See, I don't know, Allison, I don't know if the whole changing of Elizabeth being Victor's actual cousin or adopted cousin wife is is worse. Like, I think the adoption, like, pretend cousin wife is a little worse than to marry your actual cousin. I don't know. What do you think?
often heard my mother say that she was at that time the most beautiful child she had ever seen, and showed signs, even then, of a gentle and affectionate disposition. These indications, and a desire to bind as closely as possible the ties of domestic love, determined my mother to consider Elizabeth as my future wife, a design which she never found reason to repent. From this time Elizabeth Lavenza became my playfellow, and, as we grew older, my friend. She was docile and good-tempered, yet gay and playful as a summer insect.
Gay.
Although she was lively and animated, her feelings were strong and deep, and her disposition uncommonly affectionate. No one could better enjoy liberty, yet no one could submit with more grace than she did to constraint and caprice. Her imagination was luxuriant, yet her capability of application was great. Her person was the image of her mind. Her hazel eyes, although as lively as a bird's, possessed an attractive softness. Her figure was light and airy, and, though capable of enduring great fatigue, she appeared the most fragile creature in the world. While I admired her understanding and fancy, I loved to tend on her, as I should on a favourite animal, and I never saw so much grace both of person and mind united to so little pretension. Everyone adored Elizabeth. If the servants had any request to make, it was always through her intercession. We were strangers to any species of disunion and dispute, for although there was a great
Midwest
dissimilitude in our
stuff.
characters, there was a harmony in that very dissimilitude. I was more calm and philosophical than my companion, yet my temper was not so yielding. My application was of longer endurance, but it was not so severe whilst it endured. I delighted in investigating the facts relative to the actual world. She busied herself in following the aerial creations of the poets. The world was to me a secret, which I desired to discover. To her it was a vacancy, which she sought to people with imaginations of her own. My brothers were considerably younger than myself, but I had a friend in one of my schoolfellows who compensated for this deficiency. Henry Clerval was the son of a merchant of Geneva, an intimate friend of my father. He was a boy of singular talent and fancy. I remember, when he was 9 years old, he wrote a fairy tale which was the delight and amazement of all his companions. His favourite study consisted in books of chivalry and romance, and when very young I can remember that we used to act plays composed by him out of these favourite books, the principal characters of which were Orlando, Robin Hood, Amadis, and St. George. No youth could have passed more happily than mine. My parents were indulgent, and my companions amiable. Our studies were never forced, and by some means we always had an end placed in view, which excited us to ardour in the prosecution of them. It was by this method, and not by emulation, that we were urged to application. Elizabeth was not incited to apply herself to drawing that her companions might not outstrip her, but through the desire of pleasing her aunt, by the representation of some favourite scene done by her own hand. We learned Latin and English, that we might read the writings in those languages, and so far from study being made odious to us through punishment, we loved application, and our amusements would have been the labours of other children. Perhaps we did not read so many books.
Veganisaur, FYI, that's only in the movie, where the "It's alive! It's alive!" Yeah, that's only in the movies. That's like a universal thing. It's not actually in the book.
Or learn languages so quickly as those who are disciplined according to the ordinary methods, but what we learned was impressed the more deeply on our memories. In this description of our domestic circle I include Henry Clerval, for he was constantly with us. He went to school with me, and generally passed the afternoon at our house, for being an only child, and destitute of companions at home, his father was well pleased that he should find associates at our house, and we were never completely happy when Clerval was absent. I feel pleasure in dwelling on the recollections of childhood, before misfortune had tainted my mind, and changed its bright visions of extensive usefulness into gloomy and narrow reflections upon self. But, in drawing the picture of my early days, I must not omit to record those events which led, by insensible steps, to my after-tale of misery. For when I would account to myself for the birth of
Veganisaur, I think you need to give this book a chance. You can ask Allison, it's not just me. This book is, like, legit legendary. Like, it is so exquisite. It is so fucking good. Just give it a chance. Just give it a chance.
that passion which afterwards ruled my destiny, I found it arose, like a mountain river, from ignoble and almost forgotten sources. But, swelling as it proceeded, it became the torrent which, in its course, has swept away all my hopes and joys. Natural philosophy is the genius that has regulated my fate. I desire, therefore, in this narration, to state those facts which led to my predilection for that science. When I was 13 years of age, we all went on a party of pleasure to the baths near Thonon. The inclemency of the weather obliged us to remain a day confined to the inn. In this house I chanced to find a volume of the works of Cornelius Agrippa. I opened it with apathy, the theory which he attempts to demonstrate, and the wonderful fact.
Agrippa. I feel like I said it differently, but it makes sense that it's Agrippa. Or did I say Agrippa? I can't remember.
Which he relates, soon changed this feeling into enthusiasm. A new light seemed to dawn upon my mind, and bounding with joy, I communicated my discovery to my father. I cannot help remarking here the many opportunities instructors possess of directing the attention of their pupils to useful knowledge, which they utterly neglect. My father looked carelessly at the title page of my book, and said, "Ah, Cornelius Agrippa. My dear Victor, do not waste your time upon this. It is sad trash." If, instead of this remark, my father had taken the pains to explain to me that the principles of Agrippa had been entirely exploded, and that a modern system of science had been introduced which possessed much greater powers than the ancient, because the powers of the latter were chimerical, while those of the former were real and practical. Under such circumstances, I should certainly have thrown Agrippa aside, and, with my imagination warmed as it was, should probably have applied myself to the more rational theory of chemistry which has resulted from modern discoveries. It is even possible that the train of my ideas would never have received the fatal impulse that led to my ruin. But the cursory glance my father had taken of my volume by no means assured me that he was acquainted with its contents, and I continued to read with the greatest avidity. When I returned home, my first care was to procure the whole works of this author, and afterwards of Paracelsus and Albertus Magnus. I read and studied the wild fancies of these writers with delight. They appeared to me treasures known to few beside myself, and although I often wished to communicate these secret stores of knowledge to my father, yet his indefinite censure of my favourite Agrippa always withheld me. I disclosed my discoveries to Elizabeth, therefore, under a promise of strict secrecy, but she did not interest herself in the subject, and I was left by her to pursue my studies alone. It may appear very strange that a disciple of Albertus Magnus should arise in the 18th century, but our family was not scientifical, and I had not attended any of the lectures given at the schools of Geneva. My dreams were therefore undisturbed by reality, and I entered with the greatest diligence into the search of the philosopher's stone and the elixir of life. But the latter obtained my undivided attention. Wealth was an inferior object, but what glory would attend the discovery if I could banish disease from the human frame, and render man invulnerable to any but a violent death. Nor were these my only visions. The raising of ghosts or devils was a promise liberally accorded by my favourite authors, the fulfilment of which I most eagerly sought. And if my incantations were always unsuccessful, I attributed the failure rather to my own inexperience and mistake than to a want of skill or fidelity in my instructors. The natural phenomena that take place every day before our eyes did not escape my examinations. Distillation and the wonderful effects of steam.
I feel like I did pretty good on the pronunciations, okay? I feel like I did pretty good so far. I think, especially with Geneva, and I think I did pretty good. There were some things that I did wrong, like I could already see a few things that I did wrong, but I think I still did pretty solid for the pronunciations. It was just a lot less smooth than what's happening right now.
Processes of which my favourite authors were utterly ignorant, excited my astonishment. But my utmost wonder was engaged by some experiments on an air pump, which I saw employed by a gentleman whom we were in the habit of visiting. The ignorance of the early philosophers on these and several other points served to decrease their credit with me, but I could not entirely throw them aside before some other system should occupy their place in my mind. When I was about 15 years old, we had retired to our house near Bellerive, when we witnessed a most violent and terrible thunderstorm. It advanced from behind the mountains of Jura, and the thunder burst at once with frightful loudness from various quarters of the heavens. I remained, while the storm lasted, watching its progress with curiosity and delight. As I stood at the door, on a sudden I beheld a stream of fire issue from an old and beautiful oak, which stood about 20 yards from our house, and so soon as the dazzling light vanished, the oak had disappeared, and nothing remained but a blasted stump. When we visited it the next morning, we found the tree shattered in a singular manner. It was not splintered by the shock, but entirely reduced to thin ribbons of wood. I never beheld anything so utterly destroyed. The catastrophe of this tree excited my extreme astonishment, and I eagerly inquired of my father the nature and origin of thunder and lightning. He replied, electricity, describing at the same time the various effects of that power. He constructed a small electrical machine and exhibited a few experiments. He made also a kite with a wire and string which drew down that fluid from the clouds. This last stroke completed the overthrow of Cornelius Agrippa, Albertus Magnus, and Paracelsus, who had so long reigned the lords of my imagination.
You see how it's already a little different, though, Allison, because this wasn't in the last book.
But by some fatality I did not feel inclined to commence the study of any modern system, and this disinclination was influenced by the following circumstance. My father expressed a wish that I should attend a course of lectures upon natural philosophy, to which I cheerfully consented. Some accident prevented my attending these lectures until the course was nearly finished. The lecture, being therefore one of the last, was entirely incomprehensible to me. The professor discoursed with the greatest fluency of potassium and boron, of sulfates and oxides, terms to which I could affix no idea, and I became disgusted with the science of natural philosophy, although I still read Pliny and Buffon with delight, authors in my estimation of nearly equal interest and utility. My occupations at this age were principally the mathematics, and most of the branches of study appertaining to that science. I was busily employed in learning languages. Latin was already familiar to me, and I began to read some of the easiest Greek authors without the help of a lexicon. I also perfectly understood English and German. This is the list of my accomplishments at the age of 17, and you may conceive that my hours were fully employed in acquiring and maintaining a knowledge of this various literature. Another task also devolved upon me when I became the instructor of my brothers. Ernest was 6 years younger than myself, and was my principal pupil. He had been afflicted with ill health from his infancy, through which Elizabeth and I had been his constant nurses. His disposition was gentle.
Yeah, exactly. The other one was more character-driven than this one.
But he was incapable of any severe application. William, the youngest of our family, was yet an infant, and the most beautiful little fellow in the world. His lively blue eyes, dimpled cheeks, and endearing manners inspired the tenderest affection. Such was our domestic circle, from which care and pain seemed forever banished. My father directed our studies, and my mother partook of our enjoyments. Neither of us possessed the slightest preeminence over the other. The voice of command was never heard amongst us, but mutual affection engaged us all to comply with and obey the slightest desire of each other. End of section 6.
Okay. So does anyone need like me to summarize that in Gen Z language? Because I could just summarize it. So basically, basically we got Frankenstein describing where he met his dad met his Gen Alpha. Okay. I don't know Gen Alpha, bro. So basically, Daddy, Frankenstein Senior, okay, he be going to get some poontang through this guy named Beaufort, who's dying. He like basically was rolling in the Benjis, like super fucking rich, and then he got like put into the slums because a bunch of shit went down, and then he decided to get wrecked and just give up his daughter, which happens to be Frankenstein's mom, and then it's really hard to summarize the first one in Gen Z. so much easier, like in the later chapters. But anyway, basically, um, then that's how uh, Frankenstein Senior, and you know the Frankenstein's mom, Victor's mom, found each other, and then they went to Italy to go get Frankenstein's cousin Elizabeth and brought her home, which then became Frankenstein's like 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 arranged marriage cousin. And um then Frankenstein just describing and flexing on how privileged of a life he had, and how his daddy and his mommy were like the most beloved people on the planet. They were just like so much better than everybody else's parents, and he's just flexing that everyone else has a shitty fucking life. So then he's flexing on how he's just like this big brainiac who's going into these old philosophers, like who were describing science that is like dead now. Like the science is not really adequate for modern day, and so he just like was flexing that he was like getting intelligent on this, and then he tried to talk to Elizabeth, and Elizabeth's like, bruh, this is boring. Like, I don't want to fucking hear this shit. Get away from me. And so then he realizes that he's gonna have to chase after science like this by himself. And then he sees this lightning bolt strike a tree. And then he's like, holy fucking shit. It just like shattered the tree into like a billion fucking pieces. Then, hold on 1 second. So anyway, Frankenstein sees this tree explode, and then he's like, holy shit, Daddy, how did this fucking happen? And Daddy's like, well, son, it comes from electricity. And then he's like, holy shit, that's cool. I'm gonna fucking test this shit out with the kite. And then after that, he decides to pursue more of Agrippa and Magnus and all these Cornelius and all these old scientists that are talking about alchemy rather than chemistry and natural philosophy and stuff like that, which bores him to death. He's like, bruh, fuck this shit. This is boring. I don't want to fucking deal with it. And then he yeah, that's pretty much the chapter. Yeah, that's pretty much the chapter. But he decides that he's gonna go to college, but he hasn't done it yet because some shit got in the way. And he all did this by the age of 17 because he's big brained as fuck. Like, he's the most big brain motherfucker on the planet. Cause yeah. That's chapter 1. Okay. Chapter 2. Here we go.
Section 7 of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Section 7 of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley.
Sorry,
This
I had to
LibriVox
put it
recording
onto
is
my
in the public
music player
domain.
so I could press pause.
Volume 1, Chapter 2. When I had attained the age of 17, my parents resolved that I should become a student at the University of Ingolstadt. I had hitherto attended the schools of Geneva, but my father thought it necessary, for the completion of my education, that I should be made acquainted with other customs than those of my native country. My departure was therefore fixed at an early date, but, before the day resolved upon could arrive, the first misfortune of my life occurred, an omen, as it were, of my future misery. Elizabeth had caught the scarlet fever, but her illness was not severe, and she quickly recovered. During her confinement many arguments had been urged to persuade my mother to refrain from attending upon her. She had at first yielded to our entreaties, but when she heard that her favourite was recovering, she could no longer debar herself from her company, and entered her chamber long before the danger of infection was past. The consequences of this imprudence were fatal. On the 3rd day my mother sickened, her fever was very malignant, and the looks of her attendants prognosticated the worst event. On her deathbed, the fortitude and benignity of this admirable woman did not desert her. She joined the hands of Elizabeth and myself. "My children," she said, "my firmest hopes of future happiness were placed on the prospect of your union. This expectation will
Mom literally being like, get fucking hitched. You cousins, you get fucking hitched. I brought my niece over here so you two could get fucking married. Don't be disappointing me. On my deathbed. Get hitched. Consummate immediately. Let's go.
be the consolation of your father. Elizabeth, my love, you must supply my place to your younger cousins. Alas, I regret that I am taken from you, and, happy and beloved as I have been, is it not hard to quit you all? But these are not thoughts befitting me. I will endeavour to resign myself cheerfully to death, and will indulge a hope of meeting you in another world. She died calmly, and her countenance expressed affection even in death. I need not describe the feelings of those whose dearest ties are rent by that most irreparable evil, the void that presents itself to the soul, and the despair that is exhibited on the countenance. It is so long before the mind can persuade itself that she, whom we saw every day, and whose very existence appeared a part of our own, can have departed for ever, that the brightness of a beloved eye can have been extinguished, and the sound of a voice so familiar and dear to the ear can be hushed, never more to be heard. These are the reflections of the first days, but when the lapse of time proves the reality of the evil, then the actual bitterness of grief commences. Yet from whom has not that rude hand rent away some dear connection, and why should I describe a sorrow which all have felt and must feel? The time at length arrives when grief is rather an indulgence than a necessity, and the smile that plays upon the lips, though it may be deemed a sacrilege, is not banished. My mother was dead, but we still had duties which we ought to perform. We must continue our course with the rest, and learn to think ourselves fortunate, whilst one remains whom the spoiler has not seized. My journey to Ingolstadt, which had been deferred by these events, was now again
I looked this up. She is mispronouncing it. It's Ingolstadt, okay? It's a German word, okay? It's Ingolstadt. She's pronouncing it wrong.
determined upon.
Hold on. Everybody be annoying me. Why, I don't know, but it's true.
I obtained from my father a respite of some weeks. This period was spent sadly. My mother's death and my
FYI, when Allison and I were reading the book, this was the same thing that was happening. Like, I had to move or be distracted or be taken away, like, every time we were reading. It was so annoying. Like, I just want to read or listen to my book. Please leave me the fuck alone.
speedy departure depressed our spirits, but Elizabeth endeavoured to renew the spirit of cheerfulness in our little society. Since the death of her aunt, her mind had acquired new firmness and vigour. She determined to fulfil her duties with the greatest exactness, and she felt that that most imperious duty, of rendering her uncle and cousins happy, had devolved upon her. She consoled me, amused her uncle, instructed my brothers, and I never beheld her so enchanting as at this time, when she was continually endeavouring to contribute to the happiness of others, entirely forgetful of herself. The day of my departure at length arrived. I had taken leave of all my friends, excepting Clerval, who spent the last evening with us. He bitterly lamented that he was unable to accompany me, but his father could not be persuaded to part with him, intending that he should become a partner with him in business, in compliance with his favourite theory, that learning was superfluous in the commerce of ordinary life. Henry had a refined mind. He had no desire to be idle, and was well pleased to become his father's partner. But he believed that a man might become a very good trader, and yet possess a cultivated understanding. We sat late, listening to his complaints, and making many little arrangements for the future. The next morning, early, I departed. Tears gushed from the eyes of Elizabeth. They proceeded partly from sorrow at my departure, and partly because she reflected that the same journey was to have taken place 3 months before, when a mother's blessing would have accompanied me. I threw myself into the chaise that was to convey me away, and indulged in the most melancholy reflections. I, who had ever been surrounded by amiable companions, continually engaged in endeavouring to bestow mutual pleasure, I was now alone. In the university, whither I was going, I must form my own friends, and be my own protector. My life had hitherto been remarkably secluded and domestic, and this had given me invincible repugnance to new countenances. I loved my brothers, Elizabeth and Clerval. These were old familiar faces, but I believed myself totally unfitted for the company of strangers. Such were my reflections as I commenced my journey, but as I proceeded my spirits and hopes rose. I ardently desired the acquisition of knowledge. I had often, when at home, thought it hard to remain during my youth cooped up in one place, and had longed to enter the world, and take my station among other human beings. Now my desires were complied with, and it would indeed have been folly to repent. I had sufficient leisure for these and many other reflections during my journey to Ingolstadt, which was long and fatiguing. At length the high white steeple of the town met my eyes. I alighted, and was conducted to my solitary apartment, to spend the evening as I pleased. The next morning I delivered my letters of introduction, and paid a visit to some of the principal professors, and, among others, to Monsieur Krempe, professor.
I love this part so much. Just, I need you guys to pay attention, because, oh, it's so good.
of natural philosophy. He received me with politeness, and asked me several questions concerning my progress in the different branches of science appertaining to natural philosophy. I mentioned, it is true with fear and trembling, the only authors I had ever read upon those subjects. The professor stared. "Have you," he said, "really spent your time in studying such nonsense?" I replied in the affirmative. "Every minute," continued Monsieur Krempe with warmth, "every instant that you have wasted on those books is utterly and entirely lost. You have burdened your memory with exploded systems and useless names. Good God! In what desert land have you lived, where no one was kind enough to inform you that these fancies, which you have so greedily imbibed, are 1,000 years old, and as musty as they are ancient? I little expected in this enlightened and scientific age to find a disciple of Albertus Magnus and Paracelsus. My dear sir, you must begin your studies entirely anew." So saying, he stepped aside.
He's just so fucking pissed. He's like, "You fucking idiot. You fucking reading those flat earth motherfuckers. You fucking... You reading those flat earth motherfuckers. You wasted your whole time reading some nonsense bullshit. Do it again. Start over."
Wrote down a list of several books treating of natural philosophy, which he desired me to procure, and dismissed me, after mentioning that in the beginning of the following week he intended to commence a course of lectures upon natural philosophy in its general relations, and that Monsieur Waldman, a fellow professor, would lecture upon chemistry the alternate days that he missed. I returned home, not disappointed, for I had long considered those authors useless whom the professor had so strongly reprobated, but I did not feel much inclined to study the books which I had procured at his recommendation. Monsieur Krempe was a little squat man, with a gruff voice and repulsive countenance. The teacher therefore did not prepossess me in favour of his doctrine. Besides, I had a contempt for the uses of modern natural philosophy. It was very different when the masters of the science sought immortality and power. Such views, although futile, were grand, but now the scene was changed. The ambition of the inquirer seemed to limit itself to the annihilation of those visions on which my interest in science was chiefly founded. I was required to exchange chimeras of boundless grandeur for realities of little worth. Such were my reflections during the first 2 or 3 days, spent almost in solitude. But as the ensuing week commenced, I thought of the information which Monsieur Krempe had given me concerning the lectures, and although I could not consent to go and hear that little conceited fellow—
I thought it was Krempe. I really thought it was Krempe, because it has an E at the end. But I guess the E is, silent.
deliver sentences out of a pulpit, I recollected what he had said of Monsieur Waldman, whom I had never seen, as he had hitherto been out of town. Partly from curiosity, and partly from idleness, I went into the lecturing room, which Monsieur Waldman entered shortly after. This professor was very unlike his colleague. He appeared about 50 years of age, but with an aspect expressive of the greatest benevolence. A few grey hairs covered his temples, but those at the back of his head were nearly black. His person was short, but remarkably erect, and his voice the sweetest I had ever heard. He began his lecture by a recapitulation of the history of chemistry, and the various improvements made by different men of learning, pronouncing with fervour the names of the most distinguished discoverers. He then took a cursory view of the present state of the science, and explained many of its elementary terms. After having made a few preparatory experiments, he concluded with a panegyric upon modern chemistry, the terms of which I shall never forget. "The ancient teachers of this science," said he, "promised impossibilities, and performed nothing. The modern masters promise very little. They know that metals cannot be transmuted, and that the elixir of life is a chimera. But these philosophers, whose hands seem only made to dabble in dirt, and their eyes to pore over the microscope or crucible, have indeed performed miracles. They penetrate into the recesses of nature, and show how she works in her hiding places. They ascend into the heavens. They have discovered how the blood circulates, and the nature of the air we breathe. They have acquired new and almost unlimited powers. They can command the thunders of heaven, mimic the earthquake, and even mock the invisible world with its own shadows. I departed highly pleased with the professor and his lecture, and paid him a visit the same evening. His manners in private were even more mild and attractive than in public, for there was a certain dignity in his mien during his lecture, which in his own house was replaced by the greatest affability and kindness. He heard with attention my little narration concerning my studies, and smiled at the names of Cornelius Agrippa and Paracelsus, but without the contempt that Monsieur Krempe had exhibited. He said that these were men to whose indefatigable zeal modern philosophers were indebted for most of the foundations of their knowledge. They had left to us as an easier task to give new names, arrange in connected classifications, the facts which they in a great degree had been the instruments of bringing to light. The labours of men of genius, however erroneously directed, scarcely ever fail in ultimately turning to the solid advantage of mankind. I listened to his statement, which was delivered without any presumption or affectation, and then added that his lecture had removed my prejudices against modern chemists, and I, at the same time, requested his advice concerning the books I ought to procure. "I am happy," said Monsieur Waldman, "to have gained a disciple, and if your application equals your ability, I have no doubt of your success. Chemistry is that branch of natural philosophy in which the greatest improvements have been and may be made. It is on that account that I have made it my peculiar study, but at the same time I have not neglected the other branches of science. A man would make but a very sorry chemist if he attended to that department of human knowledge alone. If your wish is to become really a man of science, and not merely a petty experimentalist, I should advise you to apply to every branch of natural philosophy, including mathematics." He then took me into his laboratory and explained to me the uses of his various machines, instructing me as to what I ought to procure, and promising me the use of his own, when I should have advanced far enough in the science not to derange their mechanism. He also gave me the list of books which I had requested, and I took my leave. Thus ended a day memorable to me. It decided my future destiny. End of section 7.
So do we need a recap of that one, or can we just get on to the next one? I guess I'll just recap all of them. So basically, this chapter is he's getting ready to be old enough to go to college and everything, and but his mom dies, and during this deathbed, his mom is like, "Hey, you two cousins, you know, I brought you here, my niece, to marry my son, okay? My son, you are to marry Elizabeth, and that would make me so happy. You know, you guys have waited way too long. Just get it done, and that will make me and your father so happy. While I die, don't disappoint." And then she dies, and then Victor's all like, "Wow, bro, like, I don't even know how to deal with this right now. And, like, I'm not really grieving." And then grief starts to settle in, and then he's like, "Well, now that I'm grieving, I can't just fester on this. I still got shit to do. I gotta go to college." And Daddy told me, well, I forgot one part. His dad was saying that he needs to go to college outside of Geneva, because he wants Victor to explore and see other things, not be trapped inside one place, and he wants to learn. He wants Frankenstein's dad wants him to learn other customs. And so eventually we're back to now, present day, and he's ready to get to college, and he was like telling his friend Clairvaux to like Clairville to come with him, but Clairville's like, nah, bro, my dad tells me that I need to be a salesperson and I need to be here at the markets. And you know what? I'm kind of cool with that. I like socializing with people. I like being a free spirit. I don't want to be trapped inside of a college learning gibberish. So my dad tells me that's what it will be, is gibberish. So like I'm cool with being here. And so Frankenstein's like, Victor's all like, okay, bro, I'll just do it myself. I'll go be alone. I'll get smart all alone. I'll go to college all alone. And he just like mopes about that for a minute. And then he's like, man, how am I going to talk to other people? I've like known these people all my fucking life. I don't want to talk to no fucking strangers. But he does it anyway. He gets on the thing. He goes to Ingolstadt, which is how it's pronounced. Okay? The freaking narrator of this one is just doing the English version of the pronunciation. But it's a German word. It's Ingolstadt. Okay? So anyway. We get to the college and then he's all talking. He gets like settled down in his dormitory. And then he's all going to check out these professors. He wants to learn who he's going to be learning from. And he goes to Mr. Kremp, you know, Monsieur Kremp. And he's all like, hey, bro, what's up? And then Kremp is like really nice at first. He like seems like he's going to be such a genuine dude. And then Kremp is all like, oh, so what have you been learning? Who have you been studying? How have you been doing natural philosophy? And then he's all like, oh, man, I've been reading these guys. And he's like, have you really been reading these guys? And then Victor's all like, yeah. And then this bro is like, holy fuck me. Get this fucking guy out of here. You're wasting fucking time, boy. I'ma fucking smack you for reading some alchemy, flat earth, some bitches. Get the fuck out of my face. You know, in a much less drastic way. And then he was like, bro, you really just need to start over, okay? Start over everything that you learned. Don't take any knowledge that you got from these guys. They're fucking stupid. And then Victor's all like, damn, bro. Like, you don't gotta be like that, you fucking dick. And so he kind of just leaves all salty and shit. And then he goes to Monsieur Waldman, alright? And this guy looks like he's gonna be a fucking tool. He, like, looks at his face and he's like, god damn, I'm gonna get fucking scolded all over again. But then Waldman is all like, here, who you been studying from? And he's like, oh shit, these guys are like I'm kind of excited you've been doing this because these guys have given us the foundations of our modern science. Like, this is cool that you're looking into this. You know, like, don't get me wrong, like their methods at the time were flawed, but you know, like, we wouldn't know shit without them. So like, this is cool. Good on you, bro. And Frankenstein is just like, thanks? And he's like, hey, bro, like, do you want to be my disciple? Do you want to be my apprentice? Like, Monsieur Waldman is like, yeah, you want to be my apprentice, bro? Like, I could teach you. You could learn from me. We could, like, you could be my disciple. It'll be so fucking cool, bro. And then Victor's like, ah, hell yeah. And then Waldman's like, yeah, let's do it, bro. I didn't think I'd have this shit, but here we are. Let's go. And so, anyway, he's like, but you're gonna have to learn every bit of science, okay? Like, you can't just be learning fucking chemistry. You gotta be learning math, and you gotta be learning everything of natural philosophy. And he's like, all right, fine. And he's like, yeah, and you're gonna have all these books. And Victor's all like, all right, fine. And then he's like, let me show you my lab. And then he's like, okay, cool. And he was like, but you can't touch anything until you know how to use it. And he's like, okay, that's fair. And then he's all like excited about, having this new era of being a disciple of Monsieur Waldman. So that is chapter 2. Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad I could give a recap of that for you guys.
Section 8 of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Volume 1, Chapter 3. From this day, natural philosophy, and particularly chemistry, in the most comprehensive sense of the term, became nearly my sole occupation. I read with ardour those works, so full of genius and discrimination, which modern inquirers have written on these subjects. I attended the lectures and cultivated the acquaintance of the men of science of the university, and I found even in Monsieur Krempe a great deal of sound sense and real information, combined, it is true, with a repulsive physiognomy and manners, but not on that account the less valuable. In Monsieur Waldman I found a true friend. His gentleness was never tinged by dogmatism, and his instructions were given with an air of frankness and good nature that banished every idea of pedantry. It was perhaps the amiable character of this man that inclined me more to that branch of natural philosophy which he professed, than an intrinsic love for the science itself. But this state of mind had place only in the first steps towards knowledge. The more fully I entered into the science, the more exclusively I pursued it for its own sake. That application, which at first had been a matter of duty and resolution, now became so ardent and eager that the stars often disappeared in the light of the morning, whilst I was yet engaged in my laboratory. As I applied so closely, it may be easily conceived that I improved rapidly. My ardour was indeed the astonishment of the students, and my proficiency that of the masters. Professor Krempe often asked me, with a sly smile, how Cornelius Agrippa went on, whilst Monsieur Waldman expressed the most heartfelt exultation in my progress. 2 years.
Krempe be trolling like, hey bro, how's that? How's Agrippa, bro? You fucking liking that shit? Huh? You liking that flat earth shit, huh? Fucking Krempe.
Passed in this manner, during which I paid no visit to Geneva, but was engaged heart and soul in the pursuit of some discoveries which I hoped to make. None but those who have experienced them can conceive of the enticements of science. In other studies you go as far as others have gone before you, and there is nothing more to know. But in a scientific pursuit there is continual food for discovery and wonder. A mind of moderate capacity, which closely pursues one study, must infallibly arrive at great proficiency in that study, and I, who continually sought the attainment of one object of pursuit, and was solely wrapped up in this, improved so rapidly that, at the end of 2 years, I made some discoveries in the improvement of some chemical instruments, which procured me great esteem and admiration at the university. When I had arrived at this point, and had become as well acquainted with the theory and practice of natural philosophy as depended on the lessons of any of the professors at Ingolstadt, my residence there being no longer conducive to my improvements, I thought of returning to my friends and my native town, when an incident happened that protracted my stay. One of the phenomena which had peculiarly attracted my attention was the structure of the human frame, and indeed any animal endued with life. Whence, I often asked myself, did the principle of life proceed? It was a bold question, and one which has ever been considered as a mystery. Yet with how many things are we on the brink of becoming acquainted, if cowardice or carelessness did not restrain our inquiries? I revolved these circumstances in my mind, and determined thenceforth to apply myself more particularly to those branches of natural philosophy which relate to physiology. Unless I had been animated by an almost supernatural enthusiasm, my application to this study would have been irksome and almost intolerable. To examine the causes of life, we must first have recourse to death. I became acquainted with the science of anatomy, but this was not sufficient. I must also observe the natural decay and corruption of the human body. In my education, my father had taken the greatest precautions that my mind should be impressed with no supernatural horrors. I do not ever remember to have trembled at a tale of superstition, or to have feared the apparition of a spirit. Darkness had no effect upon my fancy, and a churchyard was to me merely the receptacle of bodies deprived of life, which, from being the seat of beauty and strength, had become food for the worm. Now I was led to examine the cause and progress of this decay, and forced to spend days and nights in vaults and charnel houses. My attention was fixed upon every object the most insupportable to the delicacy of the human feelings. I saw how the fine form of man was degraded and wasted. I beheld the corruption of death succeed to the blooming cheek of life. I saw how the worm inherited the wonders of the eye and brain. I paused, examining and analysing all the minutiae of causation, as exemplified in the change from life to death.
Sorry, I misread that. The ban was in place in 1888. It was set in place in 1888. It wasn't until 1963 that the law was repealed. 1963. That was 6 years or 3 years before my mother was born. Holy cow. 3 years before my mother was born was the year that interracial marriage was legal in Utah. Weird. No wonder why Utah's so fucking racist, bro. Thought it was just me.
And death to life, until from the midst of this darkness a sudden light broke in upon me, a light so brilliant and wondrous, yet so simple, that while I became dizzy with the immensity of the prospect which it illustrated, I was surprised that among so many men of genius who had directed their inquiries towards the same science, that I alone should be reserved to discover so astonishing a secret. Remember, I am not recording the vision of a madman. The sun does not more certainly.
However, Utah proactively ended this ban banned 4 years before the U.S. Supreme Court landmark in 1967 decision to federally allow interracial. So Utah allowed interracial marriage before the country of the U.S. did a federal allowance of interracial marriage. And so my mom was a year when it was federally allowed to have interracial marriage. Damn. Okay. Weird. That's crazy. Yeah, that's technically it's progressive, but like there should have been never been a ban in the first place. But anyway, let's get back to the book. So far he's just talking about the courtyard, about how he's like he ain't scared of corpses and shit. They're just dead bodies. Like what, why are they scary, you know? Like this doesn't scare me and shit.
shine in the heavens than that which I now affirm is true. Some miracle might have produced it, yet the stages of the discovery were distinct and probable. After days and nights of incredible labour and fatigue, I succeeded in discovering the cause of generation and life. Nay, more, I became myself capable of bestowing animation upon lifeless matter. The astonishment which I had at first experienced on this discovery soon gave way to delight and rapture. After so much time spent in painful labour, to arrive at once at the summit of my desires was the most gratifying consummation of my toils. But this discovery was so great and overwhelming that all the steps by which I had been progressively led to it were obliterated, and I beheld only the result. What had been the study and desire of the wisest men since the creation of the world was now within my grasp. Not that, like a magic scene, it all opened upon me at once. The information I had obtained was of a nature rather to direct my endeavours so soon as I should point them towards the object of my search, than to exhibit that object already accomplished. I was like the Arabian who had been buried with the dead, and found a passage to life aided only by one glimmering, and seemingly ineffectual light. I see by your eagerness, and the wonder and hope which your eyes express, my friend, that you expect to be informed of the secret with which I am acquainted. That cannot be. Listen patiently until the end of my story, and you will easily perceive why I am reserved upon that subject. I will not lead you on, unguarded and ardent as I was then, to your destruction and infallible misery. Learn from me, if not by my precepts, at least by my example, how dangerous is the acquirement of knowledge, and how much happier that man is who believes his native town to be the world, than he who aspires to become greater than his nature will allow. When I found so astonishing a power placed within my hands, I hesitated a long time concerning the manner in which I should employ it. Although I possessed the capacity of bestowing animation, yet to prepare a frame for the reception of it, with all its intricacies of fibres, muscles, and veins, still remained a work of inconceivable difficulty and labour. I doubted at first whether I should attempt the creation of a being like myself, or one of simpler organisation. But my imagination was too exalted by my first success to permit me to doubt of my ability to give life to an animal as complex and wonderful as man. The materials at present within my command hardly appeared adequate to so arduous an undertaking, but I doubted not that I should ultimately succeed. I prepared myself for a multitude of reverses. My operations might be incessantly baffled, and at last my work be imperfect. Yet, when I considered the improvement which every day takes place in science and mechanics, I was encouraged to hope my present attempts would at least lay the foundations of future success. Nor could I consider the magnitude and complexity of my plan as any argument of its impracticability. It was with these feelings that I began the creation of a human being. As the minuteness of the parts formed a great hindrance to my speed, I resolved, contrary to my first intention, to make the being of a gigantic stature, that is to say, about 8 feet in height, and proportionably large. Having formed this determination, and having spent some months in successfully collecting and arranging my materials, I began. No one can conceive the variety of feelings which bore me onwards, like a hurricane, in the first enthusiasm of success. Life and death appeared to me ideal bounds, which I should first break through, and pour a torrent of light into our dark world. A new species would bless me as its creator and source. Many happy and excellent natures would owe their being to me. No father could claim the gratitude of his child so completely as I should deserve theirs. Pursuing these reflections, I thought that if I could bestow animation upon lifeless matter, I might, in process of time, although I now found it impossible, renew life where death had apparently devoted the body to corruption. These thoughts supported my spirits while I pursued my undertaking with unremitting ardour. My cheek had grown pale with study, and my person had become emaciated with confinement. Sometimes, on the very brink of certainty, I failed. Yet still I clung to the hope which the next day or the next hour might realise. One secret which I alone possessed was the hope to which I had dedicated myself, and the moon gazed on my midnight labours, while, with unrelaxed and breathless eagerness, I pursued nature to her hiding places. Who shall conceive the horrors of my secret toil, as I dabbled among the unhallowed damps of the grave, or tortured the living animal to animate the lifeless clay? My limbs now tremble, and my eyes swim.
Bros torturing animals? What the fuck? Aww. Fuck you, Victor. Fuck you, bro. Fuck you, Victor. Fuck you. Fuck you, Victor. I didn't know you created me through torturing animals in testing. You fucking bitch. Fuck you. Fuck you, Victor. Fuck you.
The remembrance. But then a resistless and almost frantic impulse urged me forward. I seemed to have lost all soul or sensation but for this one pursuit. It was indeed but a passing trance, that only made me feel with renewed acuteness so soon as, the unnatural stimulus ceasing to operate, I had returned to my old habits. I collected bones from charnel houses, and disturbed, with profane fingers, the tremendous secrets of the human frame. In a solitary chamber, or rather cell, at the top of the house, and separated from all the other apartments by a gallery and staircase, I kept my workshop of filthy creation. My eyeballs were starting from their sockets in attending to the details of my employment. The dissecting room and the slaughter-house furnished many of my materials, and often did my human nature turn with loathing from my occupation, whilst, still urged on by an eagerness which perpetually increased, I brought my work near a conclusion. The summer months passed while I was thus engaged, heart and soul, in one pursuit. It was a most beautiful season. Never did the fields bestow a more plentiful harvest, or the vines yield a more luxuriant vintage. But my eyes were insensible to the charms of nature. And the same feelings which made me neglect the scenes around me caused me also to forget those friends who were so many miles absent, and whom I had not seen for so long a time. I knew my silence disquieted them, and I well remembered the words of my father. I know that while you are pleased with yourself, you will think of us with affection, and we shall hear regularly from you. You must pardon me if I regard any interruption in your correspondence as a proof that your other duties are equally neglected. I knew well, therefore, what would be my father's feelings, but I could not tear my thoughts from my employment, loathsome in itself, but which had taken an irresistible hold of my imagination. I wished, as it were, to procrastinate all that related to my feelings of affection until the great object, which swallowed up every habit of my nature, should be completed. I then thought that my father would be unjust if he ascribed my neglect to vice or faultiness on my part, but I am now convinced that he was justified in conceiving that I should not be altogether free from blame. A human being in perfection ought always to preserve a calm and peaceful mind, and never to allow passion or a transitory desire to disturb his tranquillity. I do not think that the pursuit of knowledge is an exception to this rule. If the study to which you apply yourself has a tendency to weaken your affections, and to destroy your taste for those simple pleasures in which no alloy can possibly mix, then that study is certainly unlawful, that is to say, not befitting the human mind. If this rule were always observed, if no man allowed any pursuit whatsoever to interfere with the tranquillity of his domestic affections, Greece had not been enslaved, Caesar would have spared his country, America would have been discovered more gradually, and the empires of Mexico and Peru had not been destroyed. But I forget that I'm moralizing in the most interesting part of my tale, and your looks remind me to proceed. My father made no reproach in his letters, and only took notice of my silence by inquiring into my occupations more particularly than before. Winter, spring, and summer passed away during my labours, but I did not watch the blossom or the expanding leaves, sights which before always yielded me supreme delight, so deeply was I engrossed in my occupation. The leaves of that year had withered before my work drew near to a close, and now every day showed me more plainly how well I had succeeded. But my enthusiasm was checked by my anxiety, and I appeared rather like one doomed by slavery to toil in the mines, or any other unwholesome trade, than an artist occupied by his favourite employment. Every night I was oppressed by a slow fever, and I became nervous to a most painful degree, a disease that I regretted the more because I had hitherto enjoyed most excellent health, and had always boasted of the firmness of my nerves. But I believed that exercise and amusement would soon drive away such symptoms, and I promised myself both of these, when my creation should be complete. End of section 8.
Okay, so basically, bro being like getting in study, he was like getting his study rhythm going. From Waldman, he was like super supportive and everything. And Kremp was like trolling the fuck out of him, being like, you stupid loser, fucking listening to Cornelius and fucking Agrippa and all these stupid fucking Magnus, you fucking idiot. Fucking Magnus, the flat earther some bitch. Get the fuck out of here. No, I'm kidding. He was just trolling him like, how are they doing? Are they doing okay? Are they helping you in the studies? Like, are they actually doing anything for you? You know, just trolling like that. And then he kind of was like just going out for a nightly stroll. And he was like, man, I'm gonna go into this courtyard, which is a graveyard, you know. And he's like, I ain't scared of dead bodies, man. Like they're just corpses. Like whatever. And then he had this light bulb fucking thing, and he was like, you know what? What if I make life? Holy shit, dude. What if I did that? That would be fucking awesome. And then he started thinking about it more, and then he was like, holy shit, I'm gonna start doing this. Like, I could do this, you know? I could probably do this. And so he starts trying to, and he grabs some, like, stuff, like corpse stuff, like starts digging up graves, grabbing body parts. He wants to make some 8-foot buff-ass some bitch, and who's gonna be fucking vegan, like make vegan gains look like a fucking couch potato. And that's his envisionment, right? And then he's like, man, this thing is gonna love me, and I'm gonna love them. We're gonna be like son and father, and he's gonna owe me so much gratitude that I brought him to life. He's gonna be my simp. But so he starts getting to work. He starts testing on animals to test to see if they like how they react to certain things. And then he starts getting body parts and putting them together, and dissecting certain animals to put in some organs and shit like that. And this isn't going well. Like it's really hard because he's failing a lot in trying to get this to work. And he's just driving himself insane. He's like, oh my god, why isn't it working? I'm such a failure. But then he's like, nah, man, I got this. I gotta keep going. And he's just getting so obsessed with actually making this work. And then he starts to make himself sick. Like, he's getting ill, man. Like, he's getting fucking sick. Like, fever. And then he's like, man, I can't wait till I start exercising and getting outside, touching grass like them vegans do. But, you know, like, for now, I just gotta get this done. And then I could touch grass. But then he is getting super close. He's almost there. And then that is the chapter. We're almost there. Almost to the creation.
Section 9 of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Volume 1, Chapter 4. It was on a dreary night of November that I beheld the accomplishment of my toils. With an anxiety that almost amounted to agony, I collected the instruments of life around me, that I might infuse a spark of being into the lifeless thing that lay at my feet. It was already 1 in the morning, the rain pattered dismally against the panes, and my candle was nearly burnt out, when, by the glimmer of the half-extinguished light, I saw the dull yellow eye of the creature open. It breathed hard, and a convulsive motion agitated its limbs. How can I describe my emotions at this catastrophe, or how delineate the wretch whom with such infinite pains and cares I had endeavoured to form? His limbs were in proportion, and I had selected his features as beautiful. Beautiful, good God! His yellow skin scarcely covered the work of muscles and arteries beneath. His hair was of a lustrous black and flowing, his teeth of a pearly whiteness, but these luxuriances only formed a more horrid contrast with his watery eyes, that seemed almost of the same colour as the dun white sockets in which they were set, his shrivelled complexion, and straight black lips. The different accidents of life are not so changeable as the feelings of human nature. I had worked hard for nearly 2 years, for the sole purpose of infusing life into an inanimate body. For this I had deprived myself of rest and health. I had desired it with an ardour that far exceeded moderation. But now that I had finished, the beauty of the dream.
I wonder if people think about this way with chickens, like producing eggs once a day, you know, and like not even being able to stand. You know, like just the selective breeding that is like once they like actually accomplish this, I wonder if they have that same feeling or if they just don't even give a shit. They're just like, ah, man, it grows, it gives us chicken, like it gives us meat, so we're gonna start feeding people like crazy. I wonder what they actually think.
Vanished, and breathless horror and disgust filled my heart. Unable to endure the aspect of the being I had created, I rushed out of the room, and continued a long time traversing my bedchamber, unable to compose my mind to sleep. At length lassitude succeeded to the tumult I had before endured, and I threw myself on the bed in my clothes, endeavouring to seek a few moments of forgetfulness. But it was in vain. I slept indeed, but I was disturbed by the wildest dreams. I thought I saw Elizabeth, in the bloom of health, walking in the streets of Ingolstadt. Delighted and surprised, I embraced her, but as I imprinted the first kiss on her lips, they became livid with the hue of death, her features appeared to change, and I thought that I held the corpse of my...
Did your rat die? Did I read that? I just paid $200 on vet bills to lay my rat to rest and have taken another rat to the vets also next month when I get paid again. Oh my gosh, Annie, that's so sad. I'm so sorry. Hopefully they're okay. The other rats.
dead mother in my arms. A shroud enveloped her form, and I saw the grave worms crawling in the folds of the flannel. I started from my sleep with horror. A cold dew covered my forehead, my teeth chattered, and every limb became convulsed, when, by the dim and yellow light of the moon, as it forced its way through the window shutters,
I'm gonna go
traversing my
back.
bedchamber, unable to compose my mind to sleep 2 years, for the sole purpose of infusing life into an inanimate body. For this I had deprived myself of rest and health. I had desired it with an ardour that far exceeded moderation. But now that I had finished, the beauty of the dream vanished, and breathless horror and disgust filled my heart. Unable to endure the aspect of the being I had created, I rushed out of the room, and continued a long time traversing my bedchamber, unable to compose my mind to sleep. At length lassitude succeeded to the tumult I had before endured, and I threw myself on the bed in my clothes, endeavouring to seek a few moments
the
of
monster's not
forgetfulness.
female.
But it was in vain. I slept indeed, but I was disturbed by the wildest dreams. I thought I saw Elizabeth, in the bloom of health, walking in the streets of Ingolstadt. Delighted and surprised, I embraced her, but as I imprinted the first kiss on her lips, they became livid with the hue of death, her features appeared to change, and I thought that I held the corpse of my dead mother in my arms. A shroud enveloped her form, and I saw the grave worms crawling in the folds of the flannel. I started from my sleep with horror. A cold dew covered my
I think you were like confused by the dream. Maybe. I'm not sure.
forehead, my teeth chattered, and every limb became convulsed, when, by the dim and yellow light of the moon, as it forced its way through the window shutters, I beheld the wretch, the miserable monster whom I had created. He held up the curtain of the bed, and his eyes, if eyes they may be called, were fixed on me. His jaws opened, and he muttered some inarticulate sounds, while a grin wrinkled his cheeks. He might have spoken, but I did not hear. One hand was stretched out, seemingly to detain me, but I escaped and rushed downstairs. I took refuge in the courtyard belonging to the house which I inhabited, where I remained during the rest of the night, walking up and down in the greatest agitation, listening attentively, catching and fearing each sound, as if it were to announce the approach of the demoniacal corpse to which I had so miserably given life. Oh, no mortal could support the horror of that countenance. A mummy again endued with animation could not be so hideous as that wretch. I had gazed on him while unfinished. He was ugly.
I don't know. I see him right here, and I think he's a good-looking Chad. Like, this guy's a Chad. This guy right here, he's a Chad. He's a beautiful man, okay? He might have a little bit of fucked upness, but he's a beautiful man. Look at those pearly white teeth, bro. Look at that, like, excellent cheekbones. Look at that exquisite broad chin. Those full lips. Bro is gorgeous. I don't know if Victor was talking about, like...
Then, but when those muscles and joints were rendered capable of motion, it became a thing such as even Dante could not have conceived. I passed the night wretchedly. Sometimes my pulse beat so quickly and hardly that I felt the palpitation of every artery. At others, I nearly sank to the ground through languor and extreme weakness. Mingled with this horror, I felt the bitterness of disappointment. Dreams that had been my food and pleasant rest for so long a space were now become a hell to me, and the change was so rapid, the overthrow so complete. Morning, dismal and wet, at length dawned, and discovered to my sleepless and aching eyes the church of Ingolstadt, its white steeple and clock, which indicated the 6th hour. The porter opened the gates of the court, which had that night been my asylum, and I issued into the streets, pacing them with quick steps, as if I sought to avoid the wretch whom I feared every turning of the street would present to my view. I did not dare return to the apartment which I inhabited, but felt impelled to hurry on, although wetted by the rain, which poured from a black and comfortless sky. I continued walking in this manner for some time, endeavouring by bodily exercise to ease the load that weighed upon my mind. I traversed the streets without any clear conception of where I was or what I was doing. My heart palpitated in the sickness of fear, and I hurried on with irregular steps, not daring to look about me. Like one who on a lonely road doth walk in fear and dread, and having once turned round walks on, and turns no more his head, because he knows a frightful fiend doth close behind him tread. Continuing thus, I came at length opposite to the inn at which the various diligences and carriages usually stopped. Here I paused, I knew not why, but I remained some minutes with my eyes fixed on a coach that was coming towards me from the other end of the street. As it drew nearer, I observed that it was the Swiss diligence. It stopped just where I was standing, and on the door being opened, I perceived Henry Clerval, who on seeing me instantly sprung out. "My dear Frankenstein," exclaimed he, "how glad I am to see you! How fortunate that you should be here at this very moment of my alighting!" Nothing could equal my delight on seeing Clerval. His presence brought back to my thoughts my father, Elizabeth, and all those scenes of home so dear to my recollection. I grasped his hand, and in a moment forgot my horror and misfortune. I felt suddenly, and for the first time during many months, calm and serene joy. I welcomed my friend, therefore, in the most cordial manner, and we walked towards my college. Clerval continued talking for some time about our mutual friends, and his own good fortune in being permitted to come to Ingolstadt. "You may easily believe," said he, "how great was the difficulty to persuade my father that it was not absolutely necessary for a merchant not to understand anything except bookkeeping. And indeed I believe I left him incredulous to the last, for his constant answer to my unwearied entreaties was the same as that of the Dutch schoolmaster in the Vicar of Wakefield. I have 10,000 florins a year without Greek, I eat heartily without Greek. But his affection for me at length overcame his dislike of learning, and he has permitted me to undertake a voyage of discovery to the land of knowledge. It gives me the greatest delight to see you, but tell me how you left my father, brothers, and Elizabeth." "Very well, and very happy, only a little uneasy that they hear from you so seldom. By the by, I mean to lecture you a little upon their account myself. But my dear Frankenstein," continued he, stopping short and gazing full in my face, "I did not before remark how very ill you appear, so thin and pale, you look as if you had been watching for several nights." "You have guessed right. I have lately been so deeply engaged in one occupation that I have not allowed myself sufficient rest, as you see. But I hope, I sincerely hope, that all these employments are now at an end, and that I am at length free." I trembled excessively. I could not endure to think of, and far less to allude to the occurrences of the preceding night. I walked with a quick pace, and we soon arrived at my college. I then reflected, and the thought made me shiver, that the creature whom I had left in my apartment might still be there, alive and walking about. I dreaded to behold this monster, but I feared still more that Henry should see him. Entreating him, therefore, to remain a few minutes at the bottom of the stairs, I darted upward towards my own room. My hand was already on the lock of the door before I recollected myself. I then paused, and a cold shivering came over me. I threw the door forcibly open, as children are accustomed to do when they expect a spectre to stand in waiting for them on the other side, but nothing appeared. I stepped fearfully in. The apartment was empty, and my bedroom was also freed from its hideous guest. I could hardly believe that so great a good fortune could have befallen me, but when I became assured that my enemy had indeed fled, I clapped my hands for joy, and ran down to Clerval. We ascended into my room, and the servant presently brought breakfast, but I was unable to contain myself. It was not joy only that possessed me. I felt my flesh tingle with excess of sensitiveness, and my pulse beat rapidly. I was unable to remain for a single instant in the same place. I jumped over the chairs, clapped my hands, and laughed aloud. Clerval at first attributed my unusual spirits to joy on his arrival, but when he observed me more attentively, he saw a wildness in my eyes for which he could not account, and my loud, unrestrained, heartless laughter frightened and astonished him. "My dear Victor," cried he, "what, for God's sake, is the matter? Do not laugh in that manner. How ill you are! What is the cause of all this?" "Do not ask me," cried I, putting my hands before my eyes, for I thought I saw the dreaded spectre glide into the room. "He can tell! Oh, save me! Save me!" I imagined that the monster seized me. I struggled furiously, and fell down in a fit. Poor Clerval, what must have been his feelings? A meeting which he anticipated with such joy so strangely turned to bitterness. But I was not the witness of his grief, for I was lifeless, and did not recover my senses for a long, long time. This was the commencement of a nervous fever which confined me for several months. During all that time Henry was my only nurse. I afterwards learned that, knowing my father's advanced age and unfitness for so long a journey, and how wretched my sickness would make Elizabeth, he spared them this grief by concealing the extent of my disorder. He knew that I could not have a more kind and attentive nurse than himself, and firm in the hope he felt of my recovery, he did not doubt that, instead of doing harm, he performed the kindest action that he could towards them. But I was, in reality, very ill, and surely nothing but the unbounded and unremitting attentions of my friend could have restored me to life. The form of the monster on whom I had bestowed existence was for ever before my eyes, and I raved incessantly concerning him. Doubtless my words surprised Henry. He at first believed them to be the wanderings of my disturbed imagination, but the pertinacity with which I continually recurred to the same subject persuaded him that my disorder indeed owed its origin to some uncommon and terrible event. By very slow degrees, and with frequent relapses, that alarmed and grieved my friend, I recovered. I remember the first time I became capable of observing outward objects with any kind of pleasure. I perceived that the fallen leaves had disappeared, and that the young buds were shooting forth from the trees that shaded my window. It was a divine spring, and the season contributed greatly to my convalescence. I felt also sentiments of joy and affection revive in my bosom. My gloom disappeared, and in a short time I became as cheerful as before I was attacked by the fatal passion. "Dearest Clerval," exclaimed I, "how kind, how very good you are to me! This whole winter, instead of being spent in study, as you promised yourself, has been consumed in my sick room. How shall I ever repay you? I feel the greatest remorse for the disappointment of which I have been the occasion, but you will forgive me?" "You will repay me entirely if you do not discompose yourself, but get well as fast as you can, and since you appear in such good spirits, I may speak to you on one subject, may I not?" I trembled. One subject. What could it be? Could he allude to an object on whom I dare not even think? "Compose yourself," said Clerval, who observed my change of colour. "I will not mention it if it agitates you, but your father and cousin would be very happy if they received a letter from you in your own handwriting. They hardly know how ill you have been, and are uneasy at your long silence." "Is that all, my dear Henry? How could you suppose that my first thought would not fly towards those dear, dear friends whom I love, and who are so deserving of my love? If this is your present temper, my friend, you will perhaps be glad to see a letter that has been lying here some days for you. It is from your cousin, I believe." End of section 9.
So I think we're gonna do the whole first volume. and then we will end the stream. Because the first volume is going to be like this is going to be like a 4-hour stream, I think. But I think we'll get through the first volume. Second volume is I think my favorite. But the third volume is also really good. But we'll just go volume to volume. Each week. So it'll take us 3 weeks to get through this.
Section 10 of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Volume 1, Chapter 5. Clerval then put the following letter into my hands. To V. Frankenstein.
Oh, by the way, recap of that. Bro makes the creature, right? Creature opens his eyes and is like, oh, Victor's like, oh shit, what the fuck has just happened? This fucking being is fugly as fuck. Get him the fuck away. He fucking smells bad. He looks bad. I can't believe I picked all these perfect things that just made him look more ugly. Like, fuck. This is terrible. What the fuck did I do? And so he leaves. He just leaves the creature, right? And then Victor just goes back to his dorm and is like, oh my god, what did I do? He starts to go to sleep and tries to sleep it off, and then he dreams of Elizabeth, and he's like, holy shit, Elizabeth here at Ingolstadt. Let's fucking go. This is my honey. He goes over to give her a hug and everything, and then she turns into like his mother, and then his mother dissolves into like getting dissolved by worms and stuff, like and maggots and shit. And then he's like, oh, and so he wakes up, and then once he wakes up, he sees the creature by the window in his dorm, and the creature is all like, trying to say some like shit that is like to his creator, and he like smiles and everything like that, but he can't speak. He doesn't know words. The creature doesn't know words. So Victor just dips. He fucking hightails it out of there. He goes down to the churchyard of the like by the church of the university and everything, and then he passes out on the middle of the road. And then he wakes up and it's like day, and it's like he's like, holy shit, what a fucking night last night. And so he's just like sitting there and just processing everything, and then he finally gets up and he starts to walk down to this bar or inn, and then all of a sudden he sees a carriage. Fucking carriages. Anyway, so he sees this carriage and it looks like a Swiss one, right? It looks like it's from Switzerland. And then all of a sudden Clairville comes out and he's like, what up, G? Holy fucking shit. Like, I convinced my daddy that I could come down here, and he's even like, he was giving me shit about not being his bookkeeper, and I didn't need to know much other than bookkeeping to come down here, but I was just like, Dad, I want to go to school. And he's like, I'm just like so happy to see you, Frankenstein. What up, G? And Frankenstein is just like, fuck. And Clairville's all like, holy shit, bro, are you okay? You haven't been writing people. Like, are you good, G? Like, do you need some fucking ibuprofen or some shit? I got you hooked, bro. I fucking take care of you, boo-boo. And, yeah. And, Frankenstein is just like, dude, like, I need a second to process this. And he's like, nah, man, we're good. Just relax, G. Let's go to your dorm. And he's like, oh shit, my dorm. What if the fucking creature's still there? What if Clairville sees what I've been doing? The fugly motherfucker in my room is about to be like exposing me and shit. But anyway, they go back up and he's like, hey, Clairville, hold the fuck back. I'm gonna go check out my room. And Clairville's just like, alright, whatever, bro. Like, do you fucking weirdo. And so Victor goes up and the creature's not there, and then he tells Clairville to come in, and he's like, holy shit! Oh my fucking god, he's gone! Fuck yeah! Let's go! He's fucking gone! Yeah! And Clairville's just looking at Victor like, bro, what the fuck are you doing? Daddy, chill. It's fucking, it's okay. Like, calm the fuck down. But like Frankenstein is just like, yeah! Fuck yeah! Let's go! And yeah, Clairville's like, holy shit, you're scaring me, dude. Relax. Fucking chill. And Frankenstein finally comes back to his senses. And he's like, holy shit, bro. Will you fucking save me? Like, oh my god. You don't even know what I've been through. Fucking save me. Thinking about the monster coming back. And, then, like Clairville's just like, yeah, bro, I got you. I'm here for you. And then he's like, Frankenstein at this point just fucking collapses in illness. And he's just like, oh my fucking god, I'm dead. I'm dying. I have a fever, but it's not like a real fever. It's like depression fever. It's like fucking damnation fever. Like, he's like just bedridden of fucking in his mind of fucking delusion of hysteria, fucking losing it. And so then Clairville's just like nurturing him as if he was like physically ill, but yeah, just like, holy shit, my homie's dying. But he wasn't really dying. He's just depressed and shit. He's fine. But anyway, he finally comes back to his senses and he's like, holy shit, Clairville, like, I could give you a kiss right now. Thank you so much for taking care of me. Bro, you've been putting off your studies. That's the whole reason you came down here. Let's go get you started on these studies, my guy. And, like, thank you so much for taking care of me, G. And Clairville's like, yeah, but I need you to tell me something. And then Frankenstein is like, holy shit. Fuck. He's gonna be asking me about the fucking creature. Fuck. No, I don't want to answer it. No, I don't want to talk about it. And he was like, okay. Clairville just sees this on his face and he's like, okay, calm down, buddy. Calm down. Don't fucking have a power. Don't fucking have a panic attack again. You're in a safe place. You're fine. You don't need to tell me nothing. But I'll just tell you what I was thinking, okay? I need you to write a letter to, I need you to read this letter, because you haven't been writing to people. They're worried about you. So I need you to read this letter from Elizabeth. And then he's like, oh, okay, I'll read this letter. And that's the end of the chapter. And now we're on the letter. But yeah, that's that. That's what happened. So, yeah, here we go.
Section 10 of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Volume 1, Chapter 5.
Relax, don't break your back, bro. Thanks, Allison. Thanks for the assist on that reflection there.
Clerval then put the following letter into my hands. To V. Frankenstein. My dear...
Give me 1 second. I'm gonna go get some liquid to drink that isn't just water. Give me a second.
Cousin, I cannot describe to you the uneasiness we have all felt concerning your health. We cannot help imagining that your friend Clerval conceals the extent of your disorder, for it is now several months since we have seen your handwriting, and all this time you have been obliged to dictate your letters to Henry. Surely, Victor, you must have been exceedingly ill, and this makes us all very wretched, as much so nearly as after the death of your dear mother. My uncle was almost persuaded that you were indeed dangerously ill, and could hardly be restrained from undertaking a journey to Ingolstadt. Clerval always writes that you are getting better. I eagerly hope that you will confirm this intelligence soon in your own handwriting, for indeed, Victor, we are all very miserable on this account. Relieve us from this fear, and we shall be the happiest creatures in the world. Your father's health is now so vigorous that he appears 10 years younger since last winter. Ernest also is so much improved that you would hardly know him. He is now nearly 16, and has lost that sickly appearance which he had some years ago. He is grown quite robust and active. My uncle and I conversed a long time last night about what profession Ernest should follow. His constant illness when young has deprived him of the habits of application, and now that he enjoys good health, he is continually in the open air, climbing the hills or rowing on the lake. I therefore proposed that he should be a farmer, which you know, cousin, is a favourite scheme of mine.
No, no, no! Unless it's a plant farmer, then maybe, but... I know what fucking earlier day farming means. No. No. He should not be a farmer. No. No, Elizabeth. No.
A farmer's is a very healthy, happy life, and the least hurtful, or rather the most beneficial profession of any. My uncle had an idea of
Beneficial, though. Fuck you.
his being educated as an advocate, that through his interest he might become a judge. But besides that, he is not at all fitted for such an occupation. It is certainly more credible to cultivate the earth for the sustenance of man.
Dad be like, he ain't no judgy bitch. He can't be or no, Dad saying he should be a judge. But then Elizabeth be like, he ain't no judgy bitch. He can't be judging people. That does not fit him at all. Let him be a farmer.
To be the confidant, and sometimes the accomplice, of his vices, which is the profession of a lawyer. I said that the employments of a prosperous farmer, if they were not a more honourable, they were at least a happier species of occupation than that of a judge, whose misfortune it was always to meddle with the dark side of human nature. My uncle smiled, and said that I ought to be an advocate myself, which put an end to the conversation on that subject. And now I must tell you a little story that will please and perhaps amuse you. Do you not remember Justine Moritz? Probably you do not. I will relate her history, therefore, in a few words. Madame Moritz, her mother, was a widow with 4 children, of whom Justine was the third. This girl had always been the favourite of her father, but, through a strange perversity, her mother could not endure her, and after the death of Monsieur Moritz treated her very ill. My aunt observed this, and, when Justine was 12 years of age, prevailed on her mother to allow her to live at her house. The republican institutions of our country have produced simpler and happier manners than those which prevail in the great monarchies that surround it. Hence there is less distinction between the several classes of its inhabitants, and the lower orders being neither so poor nor so despised, their manners are more refined and moral. A servant in Geneva does not mean the same thing as a servant in France and England. Justine, thus received in
Happy slavery, bro. Happy fucking slavery. Fuck you, bro. Happy fucking slavery. Fucking dicks. Ugh. However, she said servant, so I'm assuming she's paid. But who knows?
Family learned the duties of a servant, a condition which, in our fortunate country, does not include the idea of ignorance.
You're just saying paid, though, because you wish you were being paid right now, Allison.
And a sacrifice of the dignity of a human being.
I'm just kidding.
After what I have said,
Don't
I
hate
dare
me.
say you well remember the heroine of my little tale, for Justine was a great favourite of yours, and I recollect you once remarked that if you were in an ill humour, one glance from Justine could dissipate it, for the same reason that Ariosto gives concerning the beauty of Angelica.
Geneva, yeah. I said... Are you trying to say I didn't say Geneva? I said Geneva. I'm confused. Anyway, I'm gonna go back. I'm just pausing too much. We're gonna go back a little bit. Just a little bit. I'm sorry for pausing so much.
Simpler and happier manners than those which prevail in the great monarchies that surround it. Hence there is less distinction between the several classes of its inhabitants, and the lower orders being neither so poor nor so despised, their manners are more refined and moral. A servant in Geneva does not mean the same thing as a servant in France and England. Justine, thus received in our family, learned the duties of a servant, a condition which, in our fortunate country, does not include the idea of ignorance and a sacrifice of the dignity of a human being. After what I have said, I dare say you well remember the heroine of my little tale, for Justine was a great favourite of yours, and I recollect you once remarked that if you were in an ill humour, one glance from Justine could dissipate it, for the same reason that Ariosto gives concerning the beauty of Angelica. She looked so frank-hearted and happy. My aunt conceived a great attachment for her, by which she was induced to give her an education superior to that which she had at first intended. This benefit was fully repaid. Justine was the most grateful little creature in the world. I do not mean that she made any professions. I never heard one pass her lips. But you could see by her eyes that she almost adored her protectress. Although her disposition was gay, and in many respects inconsiderate, yet she paid the greatest attention to every gesture of my aunt. She thought her the model of all excellence, and endeavoured to imitate her phraseology and manners, so that even now she often reminds me of her. When my dearest aunt died, everyone was too much occupied in their own grief to notice poor Justine, who had attended her during her illness with the most anxious affection. Poor Justine was very ill, but other trials were reserved for her. One by one her brothers and sister died, and her mother, with the exception of her neglected daughter, was left childless. The conscience of the woman was troubled. She began to think that the deaths of her favourites was a judgment from heaven to chastise her partiality. She was a Roman Catholic, and I believe her confessor confirmed the idea which she had conceived. Accordingly, a few months after your departure for Ingolstadt, Justine was called home by her repentant mother. Poor girl, she wept when she quitted our house. She was much altered since the death of my aunt. Grief had given softness and a winning mildness to her manners, which had before been remarkable for vivacity. Nor was her residence at her mother's house of a nature to restore her gaiety. The poor woman was very vacillating in her repentance. She sometimes begged Justine to forgive her unkindness, but much oftener accused her of having caused the deaths of her brothers and sister. Perpetual fretting at length threw Madame Moritz into a decline, which at first increased her irritability, but she is now at peace for ever. She died on the first approach of cold weather, at the beginning of this last winter. Justine has returned to us, and I assure you I love her tenderly. She is very clever and gentle, and extremely pretty. As I mentioned before, her mien and her expressions continually remind me of my dear aunt. I must also say a few words to you, my dear cousin, of little darling William. I wish you could see him. He is very tall of his age, with sweet, laughing blue eyes, dark eyelashes, and curling hair. When he smiles, 2 little dimples appear on each cheek, which are rosy with health. He has already had 1 or 2 little wives, but Louisa Byron is his favourite, a pretty little
5-year-old having 2 wives, bro. What a Chad.
girl of 5 years of age. Now, dear Victor, I dare say you wish to be indulged in a little gossip concerning the good people of Geneva.
I did not roast you. I was kidding. I love you. I wouldn't roast you. You're too hot to be roasted. Like, you roast me, like, just by touching you, you know? Take those hearts. Take them. Take those hearts. Okay.
The pretty Miss Mansfield has already received the congratulatory visits on her approaching marriage with a young Englishman, John Melbourne, Esquire. Her ugly sister, Manon, married Monsieur Duvillard, the rich banker, last autumn. Your favourite schoolfellow, Louis Manoir, has suffered several misfortunes since the departure of Clerval from Geneva. But he has already recovered his spirits, and is reported to be on the point of marrying a very lively, pretty Frenchwoman, Madame Tavernier. She is a widow, and much older than Manoir, but she is very much admired and a favourite with everybody. I have written myself into good spirits, dear cousin, yet I cannot conclude without again anxiously inquiring concerning your health. Dear Victor, if you are not very ill, write yourself, and make your father and all of us happy, or... I cannot bear to think of the other side of the question. My tears already flow. Adieu, my dearest cousin. Elizabeth Lavenza, Geneva, March 18th, 17 . Dear, dear Elizabeth, I exclaimed, when I had read her letter. I will write instantly, and relieve them from the anxiety they must feel. I wrote, and this exertion greatly fatigued me, but my convalescence had commenced, and proceeded regularly. In another fortnight I was able to leave my chamber. One of my first duties on my recovery was to introduce Clerval to the several professors of the university. In doing this, I underwent a kind of rough usage, ill-befitting the wounds that my mind had sustained. Ever since the fatal night, the end of my labours, and the beginning of my misfortunes, I had conceived a violent antipathy even to the name of natural philosophy. When I was otherwise quite restored to health, the sight of a chemical instrument would renew all the agony of my nervous symptoms. Henry saw this, and had removed all my apparatus from my view. He had also changed my apartment, for he perceived that I had acquired a dislike for the room which had previously been my laboratory. But
You know what? Allison, I said apparatus the last time. I just said it like her. Even though it's apparatus, I said it. No, I said, I can't remember what I said. But she said it wrong too. We both said it wrong. We're failures. Both of us narrators are failures.
these cares of Clerval were made of no avail when I visited the professors. Monsieur Waldman inflicted torture when he praised, with kindness and warmth, the astonishing progress I had made in the sciences. He soon perceived that I disliked the subject, but not guessing the real cause, he attributed my feelings to modesty, and changed the subject from my improvement to the science itself, with a desire, as I evidently saw, of drawing me out. What could I do? He meant to please, and he tormented me. I felt as if he had placed carefully, one by one, in my view those instruments which would be afterwards used in putting me to a slow and cruel death. I writhed under his words, yet dared not exhibit the pain I felt. Clerval, whose eyes and feelings were always quick in discerning the sensations of others, declined the subject, alleging in excuse his total ignorance, and the conversation took a more general turn. I thanked my friend from my heart, but I did not speak. I saw plainly that he was surprised, but he never attempted to draw my secret from me, and although I loved him with a mixture of affection and reverence that knew no bounds, yet I could never persuade myself to confide to him that event which was so often present to my recollection, but which I feared the detail to another would only impress more deeply. Monsieur Krempe was not equally docile, and in my condition at that time of almost insupportable sensitiveness, his harsh blunt encomiums gave me even more pain than the benevolent approbation of Monsieur Waldman. "Damn the fellow!" cried he. "Why, Monsieur Clerval, I assure you he has outstripped us all. Ay, stare if you please, but it is nevertheless true. A youngster who, but a few years ago, believed Cornelius Agrippa as firmly as the gospel, has now set himself at the head of the university, and if he is not soon pulled down, we shall all be out of countenance. Ay," continued he, observing my face expressive of suffering, "Monsieur Frankenstein is modest, an excellent quality in a young man. Young men should be diffident of themselves, you know, Monsieur Clerval. I was myself when young, but that wears out in a very short time." Monsieur Krempe had now commenced a eulogy on himself, which happily turned the conversation from a subject that was so annoying to me. Clerval was no natural philosopher. His imagination was too vivid for the minutiae of science. Languages were his principal study, and he sought, by acquiring their elements, to open a field for self-instruction on his return to Geneva. Persian, Arabic, and Hebrew gained his attention after he had made himself perfectly master of Greek and Latin. For my own part, idleness had ever been irksome to me, and now that I wished to fly from reflection, and hated my former studies, I felt great relief in being the fellow pupil with my friend, and found not only instruction, but consolation in the works of the Orientalists. Their melancholy is soothing, and their joy elevating to a degree I never experienced in studying the authors of any other country. When you read their writings, life appears to consist in a warm sun and garden of roses, in the smiles and frowns of a fair enemy, and the fire that consumes your own heart. How different from the manly and heroical poetry of Greece and Rome! Summer passed away in these occupations, and my return to Geneva was fixed for the latter end of autumn, but being delayed by several accidents, winter and snow arrived, the roads were deemed impassable, and my journey was retarded until the ensuing spring. I felt
Retarded though. I'm gonna get like. Is she home? Is she home? Is she home? Is she home? Okay. Okay. I know. I know. Please just let me read my book. Please just let me read my book.
delay very bitterly, for I longed to see my native town and my beloved friends. My return had only been delayed so long from an unwillingness to leave Clerval in a strange place, before he had become acquainted with any of its inhabitants. The winter, however, was spent cheerfully, and although the spring was uncommonly late, when it came, its beauty compensated for its dilatoriness. The month of May had already commenced, and I expected the letter daily, which was to fix the date of my departure, when Henry proposed a pedestrian tour in the environs of Ingolstadt, that I might bid a personal farewell to the country I had so long inhabited. I acceded with pleasure to this proposition. I was fond of exercise, and Clerval had always been my favourite companion in the rambles of this nature that I had taken among the scenes of my native country. We passed a fortnight in these perambulations. My health and spirits had long been restored, and they gained additional strength from the salubrious air I breathed, the natural incidents of our progress, and the conversation of my friend. Study had before secluded me from the intercourse of my fellow creatures, and rendered me unsocial. But Clerval called forth the better feelings of my heart. He again taught me to love the aspect of nature, and the cheerful faces of children. Excellent friend, how sincerely did you love me, and endeavour to elevate my mind until it was on a level with your own. A selfish pursuit had cramped and narrowed me, until your gentleness and affection warmed and opened my senses. I became the same happy creature who a few years ago, loving and beloved by all, had no sorrow or care. When happy, inanimate nature had the power of bestowing on me the most delightful sensations. A serene sky and verdant fields filled me with ecstasy. The present season was indeed divine. The flowers of spring bloomed in the hedges, while those of summer were already in bud. I was undisturbed by thoughts which during the preceding year had pressed upon me, notwithstanding my endeavours to throw them off, with an invincible burden. Henry rejoiced in my gaiety, and sincerely sympathised in my feelings. He exerted himself to amuse me, while he expressed the sensations that filled his soul. The resources of his mind on this occasion were truly astonishing. His conversation was full of imagination, and very often, in imitation of the Persian and Arabic writers, he invented tales of wonderful fancy and passion. At other times he repeated my favourite poems, or drew me out into arguments which he supported with great ingenuity. We returned to our college on a Sunday afternoon. The peasants were dancing, and everyone we met appeared gay and happy. My own spirits were high, and I bounded along with feelings of unbridled joy and hilarity. End of section 10.
Okay, I may have to end it here. They're being super loud and annoying, and it's making it very hard to focus. So tomorrow I'm gonna be doing a bike ride. I'm not gonna it's for my nephew's graduation, so like they're all like super ecstatic and loud and noisy and annoying. So I think next week we'll just blast through the rest of the book. I think we'll just do like a next week where we just blast through the entire book. Like we'll just start early, rise and shine, and stuff like that. But I'm getting super annoyed that they're just constantly like, it's hard to pay attention. But anyway, I'll give a wrap. I'll wrap up this a recap of what this hopefully you guys are liking the book though. Hopefully you guys are liking it, because I was hooked way before. When I first heard this book, I was hooked way before we got to now. So I freaking love this book. So hope you guys are enjoying it. But anyway, I'll give a recap. So basically, he gets a letter. He starts to read the letter from Elizabeth, and he's all like, she's all talking about like how she's like pissed that he's not writing letters. She's like, why you ghosting me, bruh? Like, why you be like that? Why you ghosting me, you and your dad and shit, you fucking weirdo? I gotta get messages from fucking Clairville. Like, the fuck? Fuck you. By the way, you know, like Ernest, you know, your brother and all, he's like getting ready to get into a career, but we don't know what kind of career. I think he should be like a farmer and shit. But you know, your dad is all like, nah, he should be a judge, and I'm like, what? No way. He ain't capable of doing that. He's like a chill dude. He should be farming and shit. You know, like a hippie and all that. You know, like just be relaxed and all. He can't be a judge dealing with human fucking bullshit like that. No way. No. Anyway, moving on to like Ernest and stuff. From Ernest, I mean, and on to like William. Dude is like a pimp for a 5-year-old. He got like 2 girls chasing after him. He got some like dimples on his cheeks that are like rosy red. He got some like really pretty blue eyes with long black eyelashes and shit. And like there's like 2 girls like sipping over him. He got like they're like his wives and shit, and he's only 5 years old. It's fucking crazy. And that being said, you know, like, I really wish you would hit me up and all, because, you know, like, we got this girl, like, named, you remember Justine, right? I forgot that part, sorry. You remember Justine, right? Well, like, I don't know if you do, because, like, it's been so fucking long since you messaged me. You ass. Maybe you would fucking remember the people that you used to fucking live with. But anyway, so Justine, I'll give you a recap of who Justine is if you don't remember. So, she's like this servant girl that you used to get along with really well. You used to say that she would even cheer you up just by looking at her and shit. But, you know, that being said, you know, she had to go back to her family's place because, she had to go back to her family place because, you know, like her dad is getting sick and all. And so she had to go back, and she's kind of nervous about it because like England and France is not fucking Geneva, bro. Like they don't treat their servants like we do here. So I'm kind of worried about her, but you know, at least I was, but now she's back. So we're all good. You know, like everything is good. But anyway, I guess that's it for now. You know, I think you should just write me back, or like, no, actually, I don't even want to think about the orb because I'm already starting to cry and shit. So if you could, fuck, if I'm already starting to cry and shit. So if you wanna, you know, if you wanna hit me up and everything, that would be cool. So bye for now, Elizabeth. Peace. September 17th, bitch. Or whatever it was, August or some shit. I forgot the date, sorry. Anyway, so then it goes on and he moves on, and Clairville actually comes, like, we start getting to the actual study. Clairville came to learn language. That's what he wanted to learn. So, and Frankenstein is like, you know what? I'm gonna change up my studies. I'm gonna be here and hang out with Clairville but I'm gonna change up my studies. I don't want to deal with this natural philosophy anymore, because like every time I look at some like a fucking boiling flask, I fucking lose my shit. I'm fucking dying. I'm drowning. This is fucking driving me crazy. I get happy and then I look at my science equipment and then I fall apart. So that being said, I'm gonna like hang out with him and I'm gonna learn language and everything. And you know, this is actually making me feel better. I'm learning languages. I'm getting told what to do. I'm getting communicate with other professors. I'm hanging out with my boy Clairville. Like, hell yeah, dude. I'm fucking pumped. This is great. And then he's like, I'm kind of bored of this. I was only doing it for a little while, but this is like not my thing, dude. Like, fuck language. This is stupid. Like, what am I fucking doing with my life? Like, this ain't me at all. So he's like, Clairville, I'm gonna head back home. And Clairville's like, hell fucking yeah, boy. Let's go. I'm gonna stick here and study, but like, I'm super proud of you, man. You fucking came a long way. You're so much happier. I see it in your face. Like, let's fucking go. And so Clairville's like, But before you go, why don't we explore this fucking university together? And then you can fucking leave. And then Frankenstein's like, you know what? That's a cool fucking idea. We're gonna fucking do that. And then that's the chapter. Thank you. Um, yeah, I hope you guys had fun. I'm gonna go, but we'll finish the book. Like we'll just blast through all the volumes. Uh, um, next week. Like I'm not gonna do it in 3 weeks. We'll just blast through the rest of the book next week. Um, cause next week. Yeah, I think this is an awesome way to do videos. Like this was really fun. I enjoyed this. Um, maybe we should do more books. Like just do a book thing. Like just do more books like this. But anyway, um yeah, so uh after this I want to do the movie with you guys. The newest movie to show you how it's like literally the fucking opposite of the book. Like it's so weird how they just went opposite day to this book. It's if you guys have seen the movie, like you know what I'm talking about. Like everything is the opposite to what the book is done. Um so anyway, vegan book club, let's go. Um anyway, I had fun. I like summarizing it. Um but I will see you guys in the book club next week. But I'll see you guys tomorrow. For those who are gonna be here for my bike ride tomorrow, while I not participate in my nephew's graduation, and I just avoid spending time with family by doing a bike ride. It's gonna be great. Got to make sure all my shit's charged though. Um, um, yeah, it's gonna be fun. I gotta make sure all my shit's charged though. I don't know where I'm gonna ride my bike yet. Uh, but I'll figure it out. So never fret. I'll figure it out. Um, it'll probably be like a 4 hour long bike ride. It's not gonna be like a. We're not gonna be doing like 10 hours or anything like that. It's gonna be like a 4 hour long bike ride. But I appreciated you guys being here. It seemed like I've had a pretty good amount of views the entire time, so that was cool. And people were here early as fuck. So like yeah, it seemed like everyone was about this. So let's go. This was a lot of fun. I'll see you guys next week with the Vegan Book Club, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for the bike ride. Anyway, I love you all unless you're not vegan. If you're not vegan, you are a basic ass bitch. Don't be basic, be vegan. And I'll see you guys next time. Here's some balloons. Here's some balloons. I wanted to sound like the Frankenstein monster, so bye.